Good morning. For those, today in our series on prayers of power, prayers and prayers of power, I just want to touch on a few individuals in between. Last week we looked at Abraham. Now we're going to go to Jacob, but there's a few other people who have some interesting prayers in the book of Genesis in between those, and I just wanted to touch on them. I don't want to neglect some of these because they're quite interesting. So in Genesis, it's actually, this was quite interesting when I was looking through this. Genesis 16, come to Genesis 16, and it's a little bit backwards from where we were, like in the middle of where we were last time, but I'm going to look at Hagar. Hagar is a fascinating person. She often gets a bad rap because of what Paul comments about her in Galatians. Paul is using her in a figurative, metaphorical sense, but we've got to remember Hagar was a person who Jesus loved. And in fact, she is the first person to encounter God, Jesus, going by the name of Angel of Yahweh. Okay, we've talked several times, a lot at Border Church, about how Jesus is permeating the whole Old Testament. And one of the titles of Jesus in the Old Testament is Angel of Yahweh, Messenger of Yahweh. He is this is one of his titles as you see him through the Old Testament. And the first time we see this title is actually to Hagar, when she runs away from Sarah. And so if we pick it up in verse 7, the angel of Yahweh found her by a spring of water in the wilderness, the spring on the way to Shur. And he said, Hagar, servant of Sarai, where have you come from and where are you going? She said, I'm fleeing from my mistress Sarai. The angel of Yahweh said to her, return to your mistress and submit to her. The angel of Yahweh also said to her, I will surely multiply your offspring so that they cannot be numbered for multitude. And this is talking about all of the Ishmaelites, which we see today in the countless Arab nations. Okay, so this is something that we see the fulfillment of. And the angel of Yahweh said to her, behold, you are pregnant and shall bear a son. You shall call his name Ishmael, because the Lord has listened to your affliction. Ishmael means Yahweh hears. Oh, God hears. God, Elohim hears. So Ishmael means Elohim hears. He shall be a wild donkey of a man, his hand against everyone and everyone's hand against him, and he shall dwell against all his kinsmen. So she called the name of Yahweh who spoke to her, you are a God of seeing. For she said, truly I have seen him who looks after me. Therefore the well was called Beer Lahai Roy. It lies between Kadesh and Bered. Now it's interesting that the angel of Yahweh, how do we know that this angel of Yahweh is a divine person? Because she says, you are a God of seeing to the angel of Yahweh. She says, that's who she says it to. You are a God of seeing. She's saying that to the angel of Yahweh. That means that the angel of Yahweh is God. She said, I have seen him who sees me, who looks after me. So she sees this angel of Yahweh as being God himself. We're going to see this more and more as we go through some of these encounters of people who are in prayer relationships with God. Now, again, this is a prayer, because you can see that she has, in distress, gone out from Sarai, because of the way that Sarai is mistreating her, and God hears her distress. She didn't need to say a word. If you're in distress, God can translate your distress into what you're actually crying out for. And he comes and sees her. And so it's interesting that this servant woman is the first person that Jesus comes to in the whole of the Bible by the name of Angel of Yahweh. I just really love that. I really love how that honors her, how that honors, her as the mother of all of the Arabs, the Arab nations. God really is showing his watch care over her, and he gives her a prophecy for Jesus himself speaks a prophecy over Ishmael. I think that's an amazing thing. So we see that she again speaks to God in chapter 21. Hi, Varney. Hagar again speaks to God in chapter 21, and we have a look at verse 16 to 21. So this is the second time that she runs away. This time she runs she runs away, but it's under God's will. It wasn't God's will for her to run away the first time. This time it is God's will for her to run away. So she runs away. Then she went and sat down. So she runs away. Abraham gives her a skin of water and a piece of bread, a loaf of bread. That's all that Abraham gives this servant, concubine, and his son as they depart. And they run out of water. And so she lies down, and she lets this child lie down over here, and she walks over there because she doesn't want to see him die. She's like, let me not see the death of my child. And as she sat opposite him, she lifted up her voice and wept. And God heard the voice of the boy. Now, Abraham was such an example that even his boy was praying to Yahweh. And so the angel... and God heard the voice of the boy, and the angel of God, the same person who spoke to her last time, the angel of God called to Hagar from heaven and said to her, "What troubles you, Hagar? Fear not, for God has heard the voice of the boy where he is. Up, lift up the boy, and hold him fast with your hand. I will make him into a great nation." Then God opened her eyes, and she saw a well of water. She went and filled the skin with water and gave the boy a drink. And God was with the boy, and he grew up, and he lived in the wilderness and became an expert with a bow. So basically, this is the second time God speaks to Hagar. Because she's crying out, not necessarily with words of like literal words, she's crying out with her heart. So God hears the heart. Let's go to Eliezar. Eliezar is the next one. Now, Eliezar was a servant of Abraham. In fact, Abraham said that he would be his heir if he didn't have a child. Remember when God was saying, you're going to have a child, and he said, I don't have any child, I'm so old, and the only person who's going to be my heir is my servant. This was Eliezar. Now, Eliezar is a name that means God is my helper. Okay, he was the steward. He wasn't related to Abraham, he was just the steward over his house. And because Abraham didn't have a child, if he was to have died, Eliezar was going to be his heir. Now, it's interesting that he sends out this person who is being now taken over by Isaac to go out and find a wife for Isaac. And Eliezar goes out and he makes a prayer. And you can read the whole of the chapter, but it's a very specific prayer. You know, we talk about Gideon being the one who fleeced God. Remember when Gideon put out the fleece and he said, let the whole ground be dry and the fleece be wet. And then the other time it was let the fleece be dry and the ground be wet. God, this was Gideon fleecing God. Eliezar was the first one to do it that type of a thing from my understanding, because he puts a very specific test out to God in verse 12 to 14. He said, chapter 24, he says, O Yahweh, God of my master Abraham, please grant me success today and show steadfast love to my master Abraham. Behold, I'm standing by the spring of water, and the daughters of the men of the city are coming out to draw water. Let the young woman to whom I say, please let down your jar that I may drink, and who shall say, drink, and I will water your camels, let her be the one whom you have appointed for your servant Isaac. By this I shall know that you have shown steadfast love to my master. Very specific prayer, and I love how simple it is. God, I'm the one standing by the well here. You know, just so you know, I'm the one over here. It's so beautiful, and you can be that simple with God. That was 12 to 14. Okay, so in verse 13 it says, "Behold, I'm standing by the spring of water," as if God doesn't know that. But he's like, "Hey, I'm over here standing by the spring of water," and you can just see God going, I know my son," and it's really cute to see that. And so he puts this test. He's like, God, I've been sent out by your servant Abraham to find a wife for Isaac, and I don't know what I'm doing. So you're going to have to provide. And it's a very raw and basic prayer. And so I love that one. We see some prayers in the lives of Isaac and Rebekah. Isaac, like the narrative is very heavy on Abraham and is very heavy on Jacob. Isaac gets only a little bit in the middle. But it's still important. We see that they come to chapter 25, just over the page, verses 21 and 23 to 23. And we see a little bit of prayer here in the life of Isaac and Rebekah, so 21 to 23. So, actually no, it starts in, so 21. And Isaac prayed to Yahweh for his wife because she was barren. So Isaac had the same problem in conceiving as Abraham and Sarah did, Isaac and Rebekah did. So he prays for Rebekah and he says, please, obviously open up her womb. And Yahweh granted his prayer, and Rebekah, his wife, conceived. Now Isaac was already 40 when he met and married Rebekah. He was already 40 at that stage, if you follow the narrative. So he's also advancing in years. He's obviously, there's several years have gone past where she's not conceiving, and he says, please, I want to, and we know that he was very old and his eyesight was going by the time Jacob and Esau were old enough to be blessed, and so in their virility. So he was an advanced age as well. So he's praying for God to give him a child, and the Lord granted his prayer, and Rebekah, his wife, conceived. Now then she prays immediately after. The children are struggling together within her, and she says, why is this happening to me? That's a prayer. That's a very, very human prayer. Why is this happening to me? And God reveals to her then and says, 2 nations are in your womb, 2 peoples from within you shall be divided. One shall be stronger than the other, the older shall serve the younger. So God answers her prayer with a prophecy, just like he had prophesied over Ishmael to Hagar. So it's interesting, God is answering prayers, even the most basic of, God, what's happening to me? These 2 children are struggling inside of me. And so that's Isaac and Rebekah. There's not a lot else, but now I want to move to Jacob. Now Jacob is one of my other favorite characters in Genesis. Okay, Genesis, you've got Abraham, very human, very, very relatable. Jacob is the other one. In fact, Jacob's name means what? Deceiver or usurper, or, someone who, supplanter, it also means, so depending on how, someone who supplants another, someone who deceives, someone who, it's not a great name to have. Who would like to have that name?
I actually lived with the guy, Jacob.
Yes. Jacob? Yes. Now, we actually know a lot of Jacobs that you probably wouldn't realize. The English of Jacob is that if you take Jacob and you pass it through Greek and then Latin to English, it becomes James. The name James is actually the Jacob. It comes from Jacob. Did you know that? Okay, so James is Jacob. It's just a different form of Jacob. Remember when we were doing the book of James? I mentioned that his real name is Jacob. So Jacob it means deceiver. It's not a great name to start off with, but we all start off in that sort of our lives on this earth. We all start off as deceivers, as usurpers. Victor's getting to that stage where I know that lies are going to come soon. His favourite word at the moment is, what do you think? No. He's just started with the no's and the stop it. Because I must say stop it. Alina and I must say stop it. I know I do say stop it. And so he's now he knows no is not strong enough, so he says, no, stop it. If he doesn't want to do, especially when he's hangry, okay, when he's hungry and angry that he's hungry, when he's hangry, you can even say, do you want food? And he'll say, no, stop it. Even though he wants it. And so he's starting to go through that stage, and I just know that it's going to be, something will happen and we'll say, did you do that? And it's coming. It's very, very, just over the horizon for him. We all start off as deceivers, as usurpers, as supplanters. But I love about Jacob is that he gets an entire identity change by the end of it. And we're going to talk about that today. So we can start to see the picking up of his story of prayer when let's just recap. So his mum, he's a mummy's boy, isn't he? Jacob is a mummy's boy. Esau is his dad's boy. He's a man's boy. He's hairy. He's a hunter. Whereas Jacob is, you can look at his fingers and you're like, he has never worked a day in his life. He's a very, you can imagine him being a pretty boy, rather than a ruggedly, he's no Chuck Norris. He's much more of a Justin Bieber, if you will. Like you can just see that sort of a difference. And so his mum, maybe on the idea that God had said the younger will be served by the older, the older will serve the younger. Maybe she wants to help make this happen, and so she goes through this entire subterfuge. She actually models deception to him, gets him to pretend, Isaac is going blind by this stage, so she gets him to wear Esau, the brother's clothing, to put some woolly fur on his arms, so that when he served some food to his father would give him the blessing of Esau, of his brother. So he goes through this entire deception to get his birthright. He'd actually already tricked his brother out of his birthright, saying, "Sell me your birthright for a bowl of food." So there was this whole trickery going on, and this is actually a pattern for Jacob. Just like Abraham. Did Abraham have some deception in him? She's just my sister. She's also my wife, but I'm not going to tell you that part. So Abraham had this deception in him, and it passes on, doesn't it? We see it pass on. In fact, Isaac had done the same thing. Isaac, into the same person, to Abimelech, pretended that Rebekah was his sister. So this is passing on generation to generation, this deception. And Jacob is going to break that pattern. Okay, he's going to break that. He's going to get a new identity out of all of this. And Jacob, so he tricks his brother out of his birthright. Then he tricks his dad to bless him with the blessing that should have been for his brother. And then his brother is mad. Even though he's probably forgotten about the bowl of food that he swapped for the birthright, he wants to kill his brother because he got his blessing. So what does Jacob do? Well, Rebekah is scared for her son that she favors, sends him out. Go to your uncle. And so he goes out. He's now on the lam. He's a fugitive from his brother. And his brother is the more capable hunter. So he has to get out of there really, really fast. I remember when I was in primary school, I was this chubby fat kid that all I could do was run really fast away from the bullies. And if I could just get to if I could just get to where the teachers were, that was how I could survive. And you can just imagine that this burly Esau is ready to just, give him a pounding. And he's just like, I just have to get out of here. So he runs towards the desert. And he has this vision, and that's where we're going to pick up here in chapter 28. He has this dream. So Jacob left Beersheba and went towards Haran. He came to a certain place and stayed there that night because the sun had set. Taking one of the stones of the place, he put it under his head and lay down in that place to sleep. So this is a kid who's been pampered by his mum. I'm in verse 11. I just did it, verse 11. 28, 10 and 11. So he's being pampered, and now he's having to sleep with a rock for a pillow. Okay? Has anyone had to sleep with something really firm and hard for a pillow? Camping, like you go camping and sometimes it's just terrible. So he's like, this is terrible sleep. I don't know how he got to sleep because he's used to probably having the best bed in the house. And he dreamed, and behold, there was a ladder set up on the earth, and the top of it reached to heaven. And behold, the angels of God were ascending and descending upon it. Okay, this is where we get this idea of Jacob's ladder. And behold, Yahweh, the Lord, stood above it and said, I am Yahweh, the God of Abraham your father and the God of Isaac. The land on which you lie I will give to you and to your offspring. Your offspring shall be like the dust of the earth. You will spread abroad to the west, to the east, to the north, and to the south. And in you all and your offspring shall all the families of the earth be blessed. Behold, I am with you, and I will keep you wherever you go, and will bring you back to this land. For I will not leave you until I have done what I have promised you. So again, we're seeing God is initiating the conversation. We don't see Jacob talking to God before this. This is the first time that we see an initiation where Jacob is spoken to by God. You can see that he's more tried to do things in his power, hasn't he? well, I've been promised to have this birthright, I'll make it happen. You know, his mother has modeled that to him. So he is now being spoken to by God, and it's interesting what God is saying to him. I will keep you. I will make you. I will bless you. I will do these things for you. God is saying, I'm going to do it. Do you think he learns his lesson after this conversation? No. This is the first time God speaks to him. Sometimes the first time God speaks to us, he's telling us what's going to eventually be something we learn, but we're going to have to go through a lot to get there. Okay? We're going to have to go through a lot of things to get there. Jacob awakes from his... behold, I'm with you. I'll keep you wherever you go. I will bring you back to this land. I will not leave you until I have done what I have promised you. There's a lot of eyes there from God. God's saying, I will do it. I will do it. I will do it. Jacob's the one who's like, no, I'll figure it out. I'll use subterfuge. I'll use intrigue to figure it out. Well, he's going to be on the receiving end of that soon. So early in the morning, Jacob took the stone that he had put under his head, set it up for a pillar, and poured oil on top of it. He called the name of that place Bethel. Bethel means house of God. Beth means house. El is God. So Bethel means house of God. But it previously had a name Luz. And Jacob made a vow saying, if God will be with me and keep me in the way that I go, and will give me bread to eat and clothing to wear so that I come again to my father's house in peace, then Yahweh shall be my God. It's interesting, he's like, if you do this, then you'll be my God. After having this miraculous vision, beautiful vision of a massive ladder with God right there, Jesus, angels ascending and descending, he's like, well, if you do these things, then you'll be my God. It's like, doesn't quite get it, does he? He's like, it's not transactional, it's relational. God's trying to have a relationship, and he's turning it into a transaction. And this stone which I have set up for a pillar shall be God's house, and all that you give me, I will give a full tenth to you. So then he goes, and so I'm going to just explain the story from here. He goes and he goes to his uncle's house, and he meets Laban, and he falls head over heels with this girl, Rachel. He's madly in love with Rachel. Now Rachel has an older sister called Leah, and he's like, plain. She's the plain Jane, the plain Leah. But Rachel, man, she's a hottie, and he just wants to marry her. And so he proposes to the father, I want this girl. And now he's a person who's lived his life by trickery, and he then gets tricked. And so he's told, if you work 7 years for me, you can have my daughter. And so after 7 years, he's like, finally, been watching this girl for 7 years, ready to marry her, but they had the veils over the face to prevent, and this was the way that his uncle tricked him into marrying Leah, the plain girl, because the uncle's like, I'm never going to marry this girl off. So he puts the older sister in the place of the wedding and in the marriage bed, and at the end of it, Jacob's just like, what's going on here? This is not the one that I worked 7 years for. And you can just see that Laban is like, well, I said that you could marry my daughter. I didn't say which one. And so he's like, fine, I want to marry Rachel as well. And he says, you have to work another 7 years. Now, did he have to wait another 7 years to marry Rachel?
I don't think so. Why is
2 weeks. Yeah. 2 weeks later, he's able to marry Rachel, but he now has a debt of 7 years, okay? Instead of earning 7 years, now he has a debt of 7 years to pay off. And the end of that 7 years, he's like, I'm done with my uncle, really, really done with him. But his uncle convinces him to stay on for another 7 years, and whatever he wants at the end of that 7 years, he can take. Now he says, fine, I want all of the speckled and striped livestock. So any of the livestock that have spots or that have stripes, I want them. They're mine. You can have all of the ones that don't have stripes and don't have spots. And so what does Laban do? He's like, fine. And he immediately takes all of the striped and speckled livestock away, so that there's none to pass on striped and speckled genes. And so he's now got all of these non-striped and non-speckled livestock, And any that come out of them that have stripes and speckles, he's able to have for himself. That's his wages for the next 7 years. And it's interesting, I want to pick this up because it's very, very interesting what he tries to then do. So, in chapter 30, Jacob, verse 37, okay, verse 37, chapter 30, verse 37. Then Jacob took fresh sticks of poplar was a white wood, and almond and plane trees, and peeled the white streaks in them, exposing the white of the sticks. He set the sticks that he had peeled in front of the flocks in the troughs where they came to drink water, and since they had bread when they came to drink, the flocks bred in front of the sticks, and the flocks brought forth striped, speckled, and spotted kids, like calves and kids and lambs. And Jacob separated the lambs and set the faces of the flocks towards the striped and all the black in the flock of Laban. He put his own droves apart and did not put them with. So he started separating them. He started separating the ones that he was going to want from the ones that he didn't want. The strong from the weak. He started doing all this. It's like the first time we see some real genetic engineering. He's really starting. But the thing I want to focus on is he's got this idea that if he puts sticks with strips of white in them, he's going to get striped offspring. Is that how it works? That's not scientific, and in fact, some of the people who are skeptics of Christianity, they say, "Look, this is proof that they don't even know how genetics work. The Bible is completely false because of this." Well, I would like to put it to you that this was Jacob's plan, but there's nowhere that says this is God's plan. That God, nowhere does he say, "I got it from God that if I do this stripe thing, maybe then it would be fine because then it's a miracle." I think what's happening is going to be clear in a moment. So this is his plan, is to do this. And so it says, whenever the stronger of the flock were breeding, Jacob would lay the sticks in the troughs in front of the eyes, that they might breed among the sticks. But for the feebler, he would not lay there. So the feebler would be Laban's and the stronger Jacob's. Come on in, guys. We're just talking about Jacob as a prayer and his prayers. So he's got this scheme. And this is a big thing about Jacob, is he tries to make things happen in his strength, in his power. And what he's tried to do is he's tried to use the sticks to make it happen. But let's find out how it really happened. Why did the striped and speckled ones happen? Now, there is a thing called recessive genes. Okay, we know of recessive genes. Victor is an example of that. Darker hair is a stronger genetic thing. Lighter hair like mine is a weaker one. Victor has got my hair colour, so he's got the recessive gene out of that. He could have, our next child, boy or girl, I'm not going to tell you, you've got to wait. I do know. So, sorry? Oh, you think you know. Okay. Everyone's getting their guesses, team boy or team girl. But Victor, it's unlikely, but Victor has a chance of having blue eyes. Alina has brown eyes, that's the stronger gene, but there's a recessive blue eye gene in her family, and I've got the dominant gene of blue. So recessive genes means that when Laban took all the speckled and spotted ones, he wasn't depriving the ability to have speckled and spotted. Those two fully white or fully black sheep could have a speckled sheep because it's within the gene pool, okay? But putting sticks in front of them is not going to make that happen. Okay, that is completely bunkum. Let's find out how it happened. Chapter 31, verse 3 says, "Then Yahweh says to Jacob, 'Return to the land of your fathers, to your kindred, and I will be with you.' And Jacob sent and called to Rachel and Leah into the field where his flock was, and said to them, 'I see that your father does not regard me with favour as he did before, but the God of my father has been with me. You know that I have served your father with all my strength, yet your father has cheated me and changed my wages 10 times. But God did not permit him to harm me. If he said the spotted shall be your wages, then all the flock bore spotted, and if he said the striped shall be your wages, then all the flock bore striped. Thus God has taken Thus God has taken away the livestock of your father and given them to me. In the breeding season of the flock, I lifted my eyes and I saw in a dream that the goats that mated with the flock were striped, spotted and mottled. Then the angel of God said to me in a dream, Jacob, and I said, Here I am. And he said, Lift up your eyes and see, all the goats that mate with the flock are striped, spotted and mottled, for I have seen all that Laban is doing to you. I am the God of Bethel, where you anointed a pillar and made a vow to me. Now rise and go from this land and return to the land of your kindred. So Jacob had initially had this idea with the sticks, but God said, no, I'm the one who's in charge of genetics. I'm the one who wrote genetics, and I'm the one who is causing this miracle for you. It's not your power. Jacob has lived his whole life trying to accomplish in his own power what God could do for him much easier. And it's taken Jacob all this years. He's now got 2 wives. He's got 2 concubines. He's got all this livestock. He's worked 21 years for his uncle for all of this. And he's starting to realize that it wasn't him. The angel of God said that he did it. It wasn't my sticks. Notice that it wasn't his sticks. The sticks did nothing. God said, I'm the one who did that. That was my miraculous power over these genes, over this offspring of the sheep. Now we're going to get to see where Jacob goes from the deceiver who has put deception comes from trying to put out into, like, have you ever been caught in a lie? And have you told a lie to get out of that lie? Has that ever happened to you? It's exhausting. Is it not exhausting? Because then you've got to keep a track of all the lies that you've told. Okay? This is Jacob's life. Jacob is exhausted. He's had to tell lie after lie, trick after trick to get to where he's been. And God is just like, I can do it all. I'm the one who told you I'd bring you back into your land. And so let's have a look at this last encounter where Jacob comes face to face with God. So chapter 32, just over the page, and he's left Laban. He's made a treaty with Laban that they're not going to harm each other. He's heading back towards his father's land, and now he's starting to worry about Esau. Esau was wanting to kill him last time he saw him. You know, what's he spent 21 years doing? Amassing strength, the army. What is he? He doesn't know. So he's going back to his father's house, and he's worried about Esau. He's sending these messengers with gifts for Esau to try and placate him, to try and appease him, to try and win his favor. And in verse 22, that same night he rose, took his 2 wives, his 2 female servants, his 11 children, and crossed the ford of the Jabbok. He took them and sent them across the stream and everything else that he had. And Jacob was left alone. So Jacob sent everyone else across. He's like, I'm just going to spend some time. In fact, this is probably one of the first times Jacob is doing this. You know, like he's wanting to pray almost. You can almost sense that. He's like, I've done everything I can in my power, but I need more than my power. And so he sends everyone else away to safety. He's sending his family to safety. And Jacob was left alone. And then it says, and a man wrestled with him until the breaking of the day. Okay? But this wasn't an ordinary man. We're going to see that in a moment. When we see the word angel of Yahweh, that's not a created angel. That's Jesus as the messenger of Yahweh. When we see a man, sometimes it's someone who's not a man. It's someone who's God. And we see that here. So it says, a man wrestled with him until the breaking of day. When the man saw that he did not prevail against Jacob, he touched his hip socket, and Jacob's hip was put out of its joint as he wrestled with him. Then he said, let me go, for the day has broken. Okay, so the man is wrestling with him all night and has the power, when he doesn't prevail with Jacob, to touch his hip socket, and he gets dislocated. His hip gets dislocated in one go. And Jacob immediately knows that this is something else. This is someone else that he's dealing with here. And so the man says, it's almost daytime, I've got to go. And Jacob says, I'm not going to let you go until you bless me. Until you bless me. And then he said to him, "What is your name?" And he said, "Jacob." Then he said, "Your name shall no longer be called Jacob, but Israel." So Jacob was his name, deceiver. Your name is now going to be Israel, for you have striven with God and with men and have prevailed. Now, Israel, does anyone know what Israel means? It means to strive with God as a prince. Okay? It can mean prince of God, it can mean struggle with God, it can mean prevail with God. Okay, that's the range of meanings for Israel. And that's what he is doing. He's going from a deceiver to a prince. He's going from one who struggles himself to one who struggles with God and prevails with God, with God's help. And so he struggles with God all night. He is blessed with a new name. And Jacob called the name of this place Peniel, saying, "I have seen God face to face, yet my life has been delivered." Now we know that this is not an ordinary man, because he says, "I've seen God." This was God that he was wrestling with. This was the same person who he had seen in the vision. See, it's dark at night. He has no vision. But as he wrestles with him, he realizes this is the person he saw that night 21 years earlier when he was laying his head on a rock at Bethel. This is the God who had promised to him. But it's easy to receive promises from God and then turn around the next minute and try to fulfill them in your own might and strength. And that is what Jacob, that's what he was trying to do. Who's tried to do that? Who has felt prophesied over or been blessed, or something from Scripture has just spoken to you in terms of identity? This is who you are. This is what I'm calling you to. Has anyone felt that? Has anyone then gone and tried to accomplish it in your own strength? Yeah? And made a big mess of it? We talked about Moses earlier. Moses did that. Moses was called to be a deliverer from birth. That's what he was. And he made one mistake, and it took 40 more years for him to come around to that place. It's very, very possible for us to do this. Jacob didn't live up to his calling straight away. It took him 21 years until God had to cripple him, had to cripple his strength. Sometimes God has to cripple our strength so that he can accomplish in us through his strength. And that's why we see that identity change at the same time as he's crippled. Who is feeling like they're struggling with God? That's what our prayer life can be like. Jacob is an example of struggling with God. What do we struggle with God? Why do we struggle with God? Why was Jacob struggling with God all that night? Do you think maybe he was trying to rack his brain to think of something else he could do to make sure that he doesn't get killed by his brother? This is a person who his whole life has been, he's a smart guy. Jacob is one of the smartest guys in Scripture. Smart in the cunning sense, in the clever sense, in the subterfuge sense. He'd make a great spy because he knows how to deceive, he knows how to twist things. And that's Jacob, and that's us. And we need to struggle with God to the point where we've got nothing left. Where we've got nothing left, and we just surrender to him and his power. It's interesting that Jesus, who was the one he was struggling with, could Jesus overcome Jacob? It says here he didn't. He couldn't. It says here that Jesus couldn't prevail against Jacob either. Why? What was so strong in Jacob that Jesus couldn't overcome? What can't he overcome in you?
He can't work against our own will.
Yeah, you have to give him, he won't force it on you. Jesus can't force our will. What he can do is wait for us to give it to him. Not my will, but your will. Okay? Your will be done on earth as it is in heaven. So this is the struggle that we have with God. And we'll keep on struggling until he cripples our own strength, and we go, fine, you do it, because I've got nothing left to do. I've tried, and sometimes we need to get to that point where, that hit rock bottom. We've tried so many things. It's better if we don't. It would have been so much better for Jacob if 21 years earlier he had just gone, God, you've promised to do these things. Now what? But he doesn't say that. So this is an example. This is a cautionary tale of someone who is promised by God and waits 21 years to actually ask God, okay, how are you going to do it? That's where we're at. How long have you waited to ask God, how are you going to accomplish the things you promised in me? Let's do that now. Let's make that a part of our story. And God will change our beginning to a much better end. Any questions, or we can pray? No? Father, just want to thank you so much that there's stories like Jacob's who became Israel in the Bible. I thank you that you understand what we are going through. You are a God who knows that our beginning, because of this sin-filled world, our beginning is not great. But you have a promise over us, a blessing over us, that you're ready to give us at any time. I know I've fought against your blessing because I've tried to do it in my power. I've struggled with you, and I still struggle with you in ways at times. And Father, I want to let go. I want to let go and surrender to you the things that I'm trying to do in my strength. We as a church here are wanting to accomplish much in this community for you. But Father, it can't be done through our own striving. We need to rest on you. So when we give you our plans, Father, burn up anything that is not meant to be, anything that is outside of your will. Burn it up. Leave behind that which is solid. You know our plans for sowing in the period post-Easter. Father, we give them to you. You know our plans for connecting with other Christians, other churches, and joining together. We give those plans to you. Father, everything that we do, we want to put them before you. Cripple the things that are our own strength and our own pride and our own strivings, so that you can strive through us, that you can work with us. We want to be surrendered to you fully, so that you can make us princes who strive with God and prevail, just like Israel. Father, we give this to you. We ask that you will bless us. We don't want to let go of you until you bless us. And Father, we also ask you to bless the food we're about to eat and the fellowship we're about to have. May it be pleasing in your sight. And may the food strengthen us in Jesus' name. Amen.